Babygirl, the new movie starring Nicole Kidman, has been getting a lot of awards buzz, but also causing its own bit of controversy. Falling into the so-called Year of the MILF canon and bringing back 90s-era erotic thriller vibes, the movie has gotten a lot of people talking. Though not everyone is sure what exactly the movie itself is trying to say. So what is the actual point of Babygirl? And what's with the milk? Let's take a closer look. Babygirl stars Nicole Kidman as Romy, a high-powered CEO living a successful but banal life in New York City. While she has all of the outward trappings of the perfect life, high-paying job, big house, loving family, there's clearly something missing. Her relationship with her husband, played by Antonio Banderas, is loving, but we quickly learn that for Romy, there's a certain spark missing. At work, she's carved out her own place of power, but she's also constantly having to walk the line of being strong while also simultaneously being soft and approachable. In all aspects of her life, there's a tug of war between what she feels inside and how she must present herself.
She knows she's in trouble inside, but she's not sure what's going on or why. There's this restlessness and there's this interior crisis that's percolating.
She becomes interested in a young man she runs into taming a large dog who almost attacked her on her way to work, and soon finds out that he's her company's new intern, Samuel, played by Harris Dickinson. He can somehow read her like a book, and knows that what she really wants is to be under someone's thumb. Pushes her to become his mentor at work, even though as CEO, she is generally much too senior to mentor interns. But she acquiesces, and very quickly the mentorship turns into a full-blown affair, where Samuel is the one calling the shot. The big point of intrigue to audiences is the film's play with power dynamics. As a rich CEO, Romy is clearly a very powerful person, but Samuel also reminds her that now he has power over her, because he could ruin that very career. The fact that if anyone found out about the affair, Romy would certainly lose her job and the entire life she's worked for, works as a ticking time bomb to keep the thrill of danger running throughout the movie. But of course, these power dynamics also raise a lot of questions. The film works to explore the intertwined dynamics of sexuality and power, but also the interplay of power more generally in multiple different arenas and how they all intersect. We see the dynamics of the corporate world, not only in the CEO-intern relationship, which we'll analyze in a moment, but also in Romy having to navigate the working world and figure out how to survive and strive in a world of men, while also fitting into the modern expectations of how a corporate leader should behave. At home, she faces similar expectations of splitting the parts of herself and doing the work, while also sanding down her rough edges. Her relationships with her husband and children are all loving, but also strained to a certain degree because of the distance this creates. And this all connects to the major power dynamic that the film itself is interested in exploring. Romy versus herself, the way she's had to overpower certain aspects of her personality to fit into all of these worlds, and what it truly means for her to begin breaking out of this shell. She's powerful in every other aspect of her life, but we quickly find out, wants to be dominated in the bedroom. It does at first very much feel like it's playing into the old school cliche that assumes that women don't really want power, and are always secretly looking for someone to take over. This became a feature of stories as women were starting to really gain power in the corporate world in the 80s and 90s in particular. This is a trope the movie itself is playing with, but also something that Romy herself would have encountered as she was entering the working world. Instead of playing into the trope, however, the film manages to subvert it in subtle ways through her growth journey and her relationship with Samuel. But before we get into that, we should of course talk about the major power dynamic at the center of the film that has become audience's main point of interest: the age gap. Age gap relationships generally already inherently have a power dynamic that favors the older and more experienced person in the couple. This issue arises because the older party has more life experience and often more financial stability, which can make it easier for them to control the younger person. That gets extended even more when, like in Babygirl, the older person is also in a literal position of power over the younger one. In this case, she's not only his boss, but the CEO of the entire company. These power dynamics can of course exist in relationships of any genders or numbers of members, but due to the influence of heteronormativity on screen, the split we often see is, it's generally historically been seen as normal or even expected for older men to date younger women, and often any upset about the relationship was placed on the woman rather than the man. For example, saying that she's a gold digger, or that she was the one who seduced and thus has power over him.
You think I don't know what they're thinking? Here comes the hot one with the big boobies that is gonna steal my husband.
Babygirl writer-director Helena Reng briefly touched on the older man-younger woman age gap in her previous film, Bodies, 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 with Alice and her considerably older boyfriend. She hand-waves away any issues her friends bring up about him and his age at first, but we also see how much he doesn't fit into the dynamic with these young people, leading to some obvious questions about their relationship. And once things start going sideways, Alice begins to worry that there's a lot she didn't really know about this guy. When the genders are flipped and the man is the younger party, it's pretty much always framed as a conquest for the young man, a way to prove his sexual prowess by getting with a more experienced woman.
What's Luke doing here? Did you tell him about your watch?
No, why would I?
This has allowed many darker aspects of these kinds of relationships to be overlooked under the assumption that it's always just a positive learning experience for the boys, even when he isn't enjoying it.
I want you to know that I'm available to you, and if you won't sleep with me this time...
Oh my Christ.
For women in these relationships, they're usually either branded as cougars or creeps, depending on if they're seen as hot and whether the story is a comedy or a drama.
Je pense que vous êtes amoureuse de cette Jérémy. C'est déplacé. Ou pour le reste vulgaire. Vous êtes une vieille fille.
Age gap relationships don't have to be damaging or negative, though. It's entirely possible to build a happy, loving relationship with someone who isn't the same age as you, as long as there's mutual respect and care.
What? What's wrong, babe?
I don't want to talk about it.
Do it anyways.
Babygirl isn't unaware of the power dynamics at the center of its main relationship, and doesn't necessarily shy away from them. While Romy is older and in the corporate position of power, Samuel is given his own agency and kinds of power. He's the one who initiates their affair, sets the rules, and has the leverage of being able to ruin her career. While the relationship may not be totally equal, each is able to feel safe within it, which allows them to both explore new parts of themselves. All that being said, a question many walked away from the movie with is, so, what's the point? While the relationship between Romy and Samuel was a main focal point, the main thematic element the film was interested in exploring was that relationship between Romy and herself. Babygirl is very focused on Romy's inner life, and complicated and conflicting desires, and exploring how all of those parts of herself intersect, instead of just being a run-of-the-mill sex thriller. There have been some comparisons to 50 Shades of Grey, but they aren't really that apt. Sure, there's the submissive dominant element, but whereas in 50 Shades of Grey it's very much framed as taking away control from Anna, here Romy is much more clearly finding a new kind of control. And the fact that she does have the upper hand in general life, money, a job, etc., also levels the playing field in her submissive role in a way that Anna didn't have. Samuel almost doesn't feel like a real person. He's immediately inside Romy's mind, knowing exactly what she wants and pushing towards it from the moment they meet. He at times feels more like a fantasy come to life than a real person. Though this isn't on its own a totally bad thing. It allows the focus to stay on Romy and her emotional journey, and it does also add to the thriller aspect of the film. Since we don't really know much about him or what he's thinking, it heightens the danger and suspense, especially when he shows up at her house. But also what we do get to understand about Samuel makes it clear that he isn't some Christian Grey type taking out his issues on women he dates, but instead someone who wants their relationship to be consensual and enjoyable for both of them. The film is focused on Romy finding a new kind of power in learning to relinquish control. It can be a fine line between finding power and submission to another and just being straight up degrading on screen, but Babygirl manages to keep itself from toppling over into the darkness. The most talked about scene in the film actually hasn't been any of the sex scenes, but instead the one where Romy drinks milk out of a saucer at Samuel's feet like a cat, a theme that's brought back later when he sends her a glass of milk to drink in front of her colleagues at a bar. Milk is associated with innocence and fragility. It's about her accepting these parts of herself in front of others that she's usually had to hide behind a wall of stoicness. The story is engaging for its willingness to dive into touchy or uncomfortable conversations of all stripes, not just in regards to sex, but even things like plastic surgery. Nicole Kidman herself has long been needled about her attempts to keep up with Hollywood's crushing beauty standards. And here, Romy faces similar pressure and similar flack for her decision to get Botox, but she doesn't let the jabs of others around her stop her from doing what she wants to do. In past decades, a film like this would likely end with Romy facing major consequences, being taken to task for the power imbalance, the age gap, the cheating, the lying. But that doesn't really happen. On one hand, it feels odd and a bit lacking that nothing really comes of all of this. Like, the movie doesn't really want to dig too deeply into the ramifications of the dynamic it's set up, but on the other hand, the film's willingness to focus on personal growth instead of punishment allows for new room for discovery. Babygirl is by no means a perfect film, and it's certainly not for everybody. But it is an interesting addition to the erotic thriller canon for its desire to focus on the experiences and personal growth of the characters instead of just functioning as a setup to watch them being punished for their immorality. That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.